The desert stretched endlessly, its sands glowing like fire under the Arabian sun. Winds howled across the dunes, carrying with them the whispers of forgotten tribes. Arabia was a land both beautiful and harsh. Life there was shaped by thirst, by hunger, and by the endless struggle for survival. But it was also a land chosen by Allah for a purpose greater than its people could imagine. To understand why Allah sent prophets to Arabia, one must first see the condition of that land before revelation came. Arabia's harsh geography. Arabia was not like the lush lands of Egypt or the fertile valleys of Syria. It was a peninsula of deserts, rocky mountains, and scattered oases. Water was rare, and survival depended on wells and rain that came only in certain seasons. This harsh environment shaped the people into strong and resilient tribes, but it also divided them deeply. Every clan fought for its own survival, clinging to pride, honor, and tribal power. The desert, though barren, also gave Arabia a unique position in the world. It stood at the crossroads of 3 continents, Asia, Africa, and Europe. Caravans moved through its deserts carrying spices, silk, and precious goods from India and China to the Roman and Persian empires. The heart of Arabia, Makkah, became a central point for trade, known far beyond the sands. But trade was not the only reason Makkah was famous. At its center stood the Kaaba, the sacred house built by Prophet Ibrahim S. and his son Ismail S. Though centuries had passed and idol worship had corrupted its purity, the Kaaba remained a focal point for all tribes. Every year, people from across Arabia came to Makkah for pilgrimage. They brought with them their wealth, their stories, and their traditions. Thus Arabia was not an isolated desert, but a place connected to the wider world, a perfect place for the final message of Allah to begin. The age of ignorance, Jahiliyyah, before Islam, Arabia was known for its Jahiliyyah, the age of ignorance. The people were strong, proud, and skilled in poetry and war, but their spiritual life was empty. They had forgotten the pure message of Ibrahim A.S. and Ismail A.S., who had called for worship of one God. Instead, the Kaaba was filled with more than 300 idols, each tribe bringing its own false god to stand in the sacred house. They worshipped stones, wood, and even stars, believing these powerless objects could bring rain or grant children. Superstitions ruled their lives, and fortune-tellers and magicians deceived the people with lies. The belief in one God was almost lost, except for a few individuals known as Hunafa, who still searched for the truth of Ibrahim's way. Their social life was just as dark. Tribal wars were endless, sparked by insults or disputes over water. Bloodshed could last for decades, with children inheriting the hatred of their fathers. Slavery was common, and slaves were treated as less than animals. The poor were crushed by the rich, and orphans were neglected. Women were denied dignity, and some tribes even buried newborn daughters alive, fearing shame. Alcohol, gambling, and immoral practices spread freely. It was a society where injustice ruled, where the weak cried out for mercy, and where true guidance was absent. Yet within this darkness, Allah's wisdom was preparing the land for light. The people's qualities, though corrupt, the Arabs had qualities that made them ready for a divine message. They valued courage, generosity, and loyalty. A guest in their tent could be safer than in any fortress. Their language, Arabic, was unmatched. In beauty and power, poets were honored like kings, and verses of eloquence were hung on the walls of the Kaaba. This language, perfected through centuries of oral tradition, would become the vessel for the Quran, a revelation so powerful that even the greatest poets would bow before it. The Arabs also had sharp memories. In a land without books or widespread writing, they preserved history and poetry in their hearts. This strength of memory meant that when revelation came, it could be memorized and spread with precision, carried from one generation to the next without loss. Their scattered tribes, though divided, all respected Makkah and the Kaaba. This unity around the sacred house made it the perfect center for a message meant for all humanity. Allah, in His wisdom, chose not the mighty empires of Rome or Persia, but this land of deserts and tribes to be the cradle of His final message. The legacy of Ibrahim and Ismail, As. The story of why prophets came to Arabia cannot be told without Ibrahim As. and his son Ismail As. Centuries before Muhammad, Allah commanded Ibrahim to leave his wife Hajar and their infant son Ismail in the barren valley of Makkah. There was no water, no crops, only empty desert. Yet Ibrahim obeyed, trusting Allah's wisdom. Hajar ran between the hills of Safa and Marwa, searching for water, until Allah caused the spring of Zamzam to gush from the earth. This miracle turned the empty valley into a place of life. Caravans settled there, and Makkah was born. Later, Ibrahim and Ismail built the Kaaba, raising its walls with their hands, dedicating it to the worship of Allah alone. Our Lord, accept this from us. Our Lord, make us Muslims in submission to you, and from our descendants a Muslim nation in submission to you. Our Lord, send among them a messenger from themselves who will recite to them your verses and teach them the book and wisdom and purify them. Quran 2 to 127 to 129. This dua of Abraham was a seed planted in the desert. Generations later it would bloom with the arrival of Muhammad, the messenger sent to the people of Arabia and to all mankind. Why Arabia, not elsewhere? One may ask, why Arabia, when the great civilizations of the world were elsewhere? Why not Rome, Persia, or Egypt? The answer lies in Allah's wisdom. The mighty empires were filled with arrogance, wealth, and corruption. Their kings ruled with iron fists, and their people were too absorbed in worldly power to accept a new truth. Arabia, though poor and divided, was free from the direct control of these empires. It was like untouched soil, ready for a new seed. Its central position meant that once the message took root, it could spread easily across continents. Traders from Mecca traveled to Yemen, Syria, Africa, and beyond. Through them the message could travel without the need for armies or empires. Moreover, the purity of the Arabic language made it ideal for revelation. Unlike the languages of empires that constantly changed with politics and influence, Arabic was preserved in poetry and memory. The Quran, revealed in this language, would remain unchanged, its beauty unmatched, its words memorized by millions. The final preparation by the time of Muhammad's birth, Arabia had reached the peak of its ignorance. Idols surrounded the Kaaba. Injustice ruled the tribes. Yet within this corruption, the stage was perfectly set. When darkness reaches its deepest, even the smallest light shines brightest. Allah's wisdom was clear. Arabia's harsh deserts, had forged strong, resilient people. Its language was powerful enough to carry divine revelation. Its central position made it the perfect hub for spreading truth, and its legacy of Ibrahim and Ismail meant that the Kaaba stood as a reminder of pure worship, waiting to be cleansed. The time had come for a prophet. The dua of Ibrahim was about to be answered. The story of Arabia was not written in one night. It was shaped over centuries, prepared step by the will of Allah. Part 1 showed us the background, the land, the tribes, the Kaaba, and the age of ignorance. Now, in Part 2, we enter the heart of the story, how Allah's prophets came to Arabia, and how their mission laid the foundation for the final message to be revealed. Ibrahim, A.S., and the sacred legacy it began with Ibrahim, A.S., after building the Kaaba with Ismail, A.S., Ibrahim made a dua that echoed through the centuries. He prayed not just for safety and provision, but for a messenger to rise from among the people of Arabia, a messenger who would call them back to Allah. This dua was not forgotten. The Kaaba, though filled with idols later, always stood as a reminder of that pure worship. Pilgrims still came, even if their rituals were corrupted. The story of Zamzam, of Hajar's struggle, of Ibrahim's sacrifice of his son, these stories lived on in fragments among the Arabs. Though twisted by time, they were never fully erased. This was part of Allah's wisdom. Arabia was not cut off from the legacy of prophethood. It was the very land where Ibrahim left his son, where a house for Allah was built, and where the memory of Tawheed still lingered like an ember under ashes. Ismail, A.S., and his descendants Ismail, A.S., grew up among the Jurhum tribe in Makkah. He married from them, learned their language, and became one of them. From his descendants the tribes of Arabia spread, most famously the Quraysh, the tribe of the final messenger, Muhammad. Ismail was known for his patience and obedience. He too was a prophet, calling his people to worship Allah alone. His example of sacrifice alongside his father's became central to the rituals of Hajj. Even before Islam, the Arabs remembered Ibrahim and Ismail when they made pilgrimage, though they had polluted the worship with idols. Thus, Arabia was not without prophets. Its very roots lay in prophethood. But as centuries passed, the pure message was lost and people drowned in ignorance once more. The gap in prophethood between Ismail, A.S., and Muhammad, many centuries passed. In other parts of the world, Allah sent prophets to Bani Israel, to the people of Rome, to the lands of Persia, and beyond. But Arabia seemed quiet. This was also wisdom. By leaving them without direct prophets for so long, their ignorance grew deeper, and their need for guidance became undeniable. When the final messenger arrived, no one could claim that Arabia already had enough guidance. The land was spiritually empty, thirsty for truth. Its people, lost in idol worship and endless wars, would feel the power of revelation more strongly. The Arab character and language, another wisdom. In sending prophets to Arabia was the people themselves. They were harsh, but also noble. They valued honor, generosity, and bravery. When truth reached their hearts, they would defend it with the same courage they once used in tribal battles. Their language, too, was unmatched. Arabic was a language of poetry, rhythm, and depth. A single line of verse could move tribes to tears or rage. When the Quran was revealed in Arabic, even the greatest poets admitted they could not match it. Allah chose the best language for the best message, ensuring its beauty and power would never fade. The coming of Muhammad at last, the final step of the divine plan, arrived. In the year of the elephant, 570 CE, a child was born in Mecca to the tribe of Quraysh. His name was Muhammad ibn Abdullah. His birth itself carried signs of destiny. His father had died before his birth, and his mother Amina died when he was still young. He grew up as an orphan, protected by Allah, raised first by his grandfather Abdul Muttalib, and then by his uncle Abu Talib. From his youth, Muhammad was known as Al-Amin, the Trustworthy. He never bowed to idols, never drank wine, never cheated or lied. He lived among his people, but was set apart by his character. He was chosen to carry the final message, the seal of all Prophethood, at the age of 40, while meditating in the cave of Hira. He received the first revelation. The angel Jibril came to him and said, "Read, in the name of your Lord who created." Quran 96:1. With these words the world changed forever. Why Arabia for the final prophet? The choice of Arabia for Muhammad was filled with wisdom. Central location, Arabia connected trade routes between East and West. From here, Islam could spread to every corner of the world. Preserved language. Arabic's clarity and eloquence made it the perfect carrier of revelation. Strong memory culture. In a society where poetry and lineage were memorized, the Quran could be preserved word for word without loss. Spiritual emptiness. After centuries without prophets, the Arabs had no excuse to reject guidance. Their hearts were thirsty for truth. Tribal society. Once tribes accepted Islam, the faith spread quickly through their loyalty networks. The Kaaba, as the house built by Ibrahim and Ismail, it was already a symbol of worship. Cleansing it of idols made it a universal center of Tawheed. Opposition and struggle. When Muhammad began his mission, the Quraysh resisted fiercely. They mocked him, accused him of sorcery, and tortured his followers. But Allah's plan was unfolding. Every hardship became part of the legacy. Bilal's voice crying, "Ahad, Ahad," under torture showed the world the strength of faith. Sumaya, the first martyr, proved that Islam could not be crushed by cruelty. Makkah's rejection led to Medina's acceptance. There, tribes that once fought endless wars found unity under Islam. From Medina, Islam grew, not just as a belief, but as a complete way of life, guiding politics, family, trade, and justice. The message spreads within 23 years. The Prophet saw the Quran revealed in full, the Kaaba cleansed of idols, and Arabia united in Islam. The tribes that once fought each other now stood side by side in prayer. And from Arabia, Islam began to flow outward, to Persia, to Rome, to Africa, to the entire world. This was the wisdom of Allah. The desert that once seemed empty became the fountain of guidance for all humanity. The prophetic mission in Arabia was no accident. It was prepared through centuries of history, through Ibrahim and Ismail, through the Kaaba, through the language, the culture, and even the ignorance of Jahiliyyah. All of it led to the rise of Muhammad, the seal of the prophets. Allah chose Arabia because it was the perfect stage for a universal message. A land without kings, free from empires, filled with tribes tied to the Kaaba, speaking the most powerful language on earth. All of this was wisdom. The message of Tawheed, carried by Muhammad, began in Arabia, but it was never meant to stay there. It was meant for every nation, every people, every age. The revelation in Arabia did not remain trapped within the sands of the desert. It was born there, but it was meant for all of humanity. The choice of Arabia was not random. It was part of a perfect plan that unfolded step by step. In Part 3, we see how Islam spread beyond Arabia, how the Quran became eternal guidance, and what lessons Muslims today must learn from this divine wisdom. Islam's rise beyond Arabia. When Prophet Muhammad completed his mission, Arabia was transformed. The Kaaba was cleansed of idols. Tribes once at war stood shoulder to shoulder in prayer, and a new sense of unity was born. But the mission did not end with Arabia. After the Prophet returned to his Lord, the responsibility passed to his companions. They carried the message across deserts, seas, and mountains. Within a single generation, Islam reached the mighty Persian Empire in the east and the Byzantine Empire in the west. Lands that had once seemed unreachable were now hearing the call of La ilaha illallah. This rapid spread was not through force alone. Many lands welcomed Islam because of its justice and mercy. In places where people were crushed under heavy taxes, corrupt kings, or rigid social systems, Islam offered freedom and equality. Slaves, the poor, and the weak saw in Islam a light that honored them as equals before Allah, the Quran, eternal. Guidance. One of the greatest wisdoms in choosing Arabia was the Quran itself. Revealed in Arabic, it became the unchanging heart of Islam. The Arabs' strong memory culture ensured it was memorized word for word. Even today, millions recite it exactly as it was revealed more than 1,400 years ago. The Quran was not meant for Arabia alone. It spoke of the past prophets, Nuh, Musa, Isa, and many others, showing Islam as a continuation of one divine truth. It corrected the errors of previous nations and provided a message fit for all times. Its words spoke not only to Bedouins in the desert, but also to scholars in palaces, merchants in markets, and even to future generations living in lands the Arabs could not imagine. The Tuan-Hes language was unmatched. Even the greatest poets of Arabia admitted they could not produce anything like it. Its rhythm touched hearts, its wisdom changed lives, and its promises gave hope to the oppressed. Why Arabia? Why then? By placing the final revelation in Arabia, Allah ensured several things: neutral ground. Arabia was not under the direct control of the great empires. It was free from political interference, allowing Islam to grow naturally. Central position. Caravans connected Arabia to Asia, Africa, and Europe. Once Islam took root, it could spread in all directions. Spiritual need, the Arabs' ignorance, made the truth shine brighter. When they embraced Islam, their transformation was proof of its power. Language power. Arabic's clarity preserved the Quran, ensuring no corruption could touch it. This was divine wisdom revealed step by step. The desert that seemed barren became the birthplace of a faith that would reach every corner of the earth. The transformation of Arabia. The greatest miracle was not just the Quran, but the people it changed. Tribes that once fought endless wars became brothers. Men who buried their daughters alive now honored women as mothers and daughters of faith. Slaves were lifted as equals. no longer defined by chains but by their taqwa. Injustice gave way to justice, cruelty to mercy, ignorance to knowledge. The people who had nothing became the carriers of guidance for the world. Arabia was transformed from a land of idols into a land of monotheism, from Jahiliyyah to the beacon of Islam. The universal mission, the prophet said, "Every prophet before me was sent to his own people, but I was sent to all mankind." This was the key difference. Previous prophets had local missions, Musa to Bani Israel, Isa to his people, but Muhammad was sent for all humanity until the last day. That is why Arabia was chosen, a place connected to the world, yet humble enough to show that greatness comes not from empire or wealth, but from truth. From the desert came a message that crossed oceans and mountains, lessons for Muslims. Today the story of prophets in Arabia is not just history, it is a mirror. For Muslims today, it teaches that faith is the greatest strength. The Arabs had nothing, no empire, no wealth, but with Islam they became leaders of nations. Unity is essential. Tribal wars destroyed Arabia until Islam united them under one banner. Today's divisions can only be healed with the same unity. Of faith, justice, and mercy spread Islam. It was not the sword alone that carried Islam, but its fairness and compassion. The Quran is eternal guidance. Just as it changed the Arabs, it can change any people if they return to it sincerely. Allah's plan is always perfect. What seemed like a barren desert was in fact the chosen cradle of the final message. The question, why were prophets sent to Arabia, is answered not only by history but by the living reality of Islam today. Arabia was chosen because it was the perfect stage, geographically, linguistically, culturally, and spiritually. The desert was prepared by centuries of hardship, by the legacy of Ibrahim and Ismail, by the Kaaba standing as a silent witness to Tawheed. From this land Allah raised Muhammad, the seal of the prophets, and gave him a message not for one tribe or one nation, but for all humanity. The wisdom is clear. Islam was born in Arabia, so it could belong everywhere. Pharaohs and emperors have vanished. Empires have risen and fallen, but the call of Islam still echoes from the deserts of Arabia to the cities of the world. The Quran is still recited as it was first revealed. The Kaaba still stands, not filled with idols, but surrounded by millions proclaiming, Labbaik Allahumma Labbaik. This is the divine wisdom revealed. The prophets were sent to Arabia not by chance, but by the perfect plan of Allah, a plan that turned a barren land into the fountain of faith for all mankind. And that wisdom continues to guide every believer, reminding us that the truth of Allah is eternal and His plan is flawless.